welcome our television and webcast viewers. I would like to thank Rogers and 680 News for their continued support of the Canadian Club and its events. And also, I'd like to thank MediaEvents.ca, Canada's online event space, for live streaming today's event. And this event will be broadcast on Rogers TV in the days to come. My name is Danny Asaf, and I am the immediate past president of the Canadian Club of Toronto, and very honored to be your host today. And we are pleased that you've made time out of your busy schedules to join us for this installment of our Canada 150 series. For 120 seasons, the Canadian Club has been proud to provide a forum for leaders and visionaries in every aspect of our society to share their ideas with us. We've always been proud of providing this warm and welcoming venue for people to come and debate and to give us insights into the important issues that impact our daily lives. Through our programs and all of our activities, we do continue to provide access to dynamic political, business, and social leaders, both from abroad and right here at home. And before I take the opportunity to introduce our panel and get on with the main event, I again would ask your brief indulgence to tell you a little bit about a couple of our upcoming events. On Monday, October 3rd, we're proud to host the former Prime Minister of France, Jean-Pierre Raffarin, will be at our podium to speak about global geopolitical trends. And on Wednesday, October 5th, we're proud to host from south of the border, Arizona Governor Doug Ducey, who will be here to discuss economic opportunities between the Grand Canyon State and Canada. To order your tickets or learn more about the Canadian Club, please feel free to visit us at our website, canadianclub.org. And you're also welcome to join the conversation via Twitter and Instagram by following us at CDN CLBTO. I would also like to take a moment to express our special thanks to our Canada 150 series sponsors. And they include the City of Toronto and Gluskin Sheff. Without you, this whole series wouldn't have been possible. Thank you very much. And also to take a brief moment to thank our event sponsors as well, EY and Norton Rose Fulbright. Thank you very much for sponsoring today's event. As a non-for-profit, it is critical that we have the support of institutions and organizations like that to continue, hopefully, into our 121st year. I would also like to take a moment to recognize the youth and young leaders who are with us here today. And they are from 111 and Mars Ventures. And they are sponsored, these tables, if you could just stand so we could recognize these youth and young leaders, sponsored by Tories LLP and also the Canadian Club of Toronto. Thank you very much for joining us and welcome. Thank you. So as I mentioned, we are very pleased to have you here today to be with us for this installment of our Canada 150 series, which has been intended to explore the key pillars of our economic development for Canada as we look forward to our future and beyond our 150th birthday. One of those indispensable pillars is the role of innovation, employment, and entrepreneurship, an indispensable key to our future. And this is important not only because we all love our kids and want to see them succeed, but also because they are going to be key drivers of creating new wealth for their benefit and our benefit, and also to contributing to the continued vibrancy of our democracy. They will create new wealth because they will do things that we, my generation, may not even dream of. And that is because they are still filled with the potential and the optimism to be able to try things and to change and to do new things because they don't know what they're yet best at, so they'll always have that courage to continue to try things that they may fail at before they get to those new dreams and ventures that will benefit us all. And secondly, hopefully, through their future success, their influence will permeate its way to being at the table, to shape future policy decisions that impact us today, and their new ideas and their new networks will be something that will keep our democracy vibrant. But the key to all of this is, and the art of this, is how to enable it. And that's why we're very happy to have leaders such as Dave McKay here today and to take the mantle of being one of Canada's prominent Canadians to say he and his organization want to take this challenge. We all know Dave McKay is the current president and CEO of RBC, and know that he was appointed as president and chief executive officer of RBC 2 years ago. And he has spent his career has spanned over 30 years at RBC, and he has held increasingly senior positions at RBC, both here and abroad. And he is widely recognized, obviously, for his success and his banking accomplishments. And one small accolade, in 2012, he was named the Retail Banker of the Year by Retail Banker International. But he also cares about our youth. And a couple of small examples of that is that he serves on the Board of Trustees for the Hospital of Sick Children here in Toronto. He's also the chair of the Toronto Region Immigrant Employment Council. And in addition to that, still finds time to serve as a director of the Conference Board of Canada and a member of Catalyst Canada Advisory Board and the Business Council of Canada. And on that note, I would like to welcome Dave McKay. The Canadian Club podium is yours.
Thanks. Yeah, that's just great. Well, good afternoon, everybody. I bet you didn't know they had a global award for retail bankers. Surprise to me, too. And I really thank you, Danny, and the Canadian Club for structuring an event a little more informal so I don't have to wear a tie for the first time. So it's not that often I get to stand up in front of an audience without a tie, but I think it's very much apropos given our topic today and our panel today. So I am very pleased to be part of the Canadian Club's Canada 150 series. And as we kind of look forward to next year when we celebrate our 150 years, we have so much to be proud of as Canadians. I get a chance in my job and my career with RBC to travel coast to coast from Tofino right through to Goose Bay, all points in between. And we have just a wonderful country with great leaders. But as we anticipate the future and we look forward to the future, I think it's so important for us to focus on our future in Canada through the eyes of the leaders who are going to be taking us there and who are going to lead us there. There's so much to learn from them. And this really can be our century. And the group of young leaders that you're going to see on stage in a few minutes will be the types of leaders that are going to take us there. But we live in an age of discontinuity, an age of change, how we communicate, how we travel, how we look at medicine, technology, and digitization is challenging the way we look at the world and our construct of our world. I was recently with a company, the Weather Channel, a company that you think forecasts weather. And historically, they would have a team of meteorologists around an airport where they had the best radar technology, and they'd try to forecast the weather. That company today has over 1 billion sensors around the world, right down to the windshield wipers in your car, recording everything that's going on to help predict weather across our world. So as a society, we're collecting more data in the last 2 years than we've collected in the last 1,000 years. We're measuring everything. We're storing everything. We're teaching machines how to understand, how to solve problems for us. Machines are communicating with machines. Machines are teaching machines. We're in a very, very different area. And our future and the success of Canada really rests in the hands of a generation of digitally savvy young entrepreneurs who are going to lead us. They will redefine Canada's future, not just in business, but in our society. So I'm very pleased to welcome 3 young trailblazing entrepreneurs who really represent the future of Canada. And we're going to talk about how they started their companies, some of the challenges that they had in leading those companies, advice they might have for other entrepreneurs and senior leaders like myself in the audience. And we're also going to talk about what we need to do in Canada to make it successful for the next 150 years. You know, as someone who leads a company that is almost as old as the country itself, I know we have a lot to learn from these young leaders. So just to set the context a little bit, the environment to start a company and to thrive in Canada is really positive. Canada, I think, was rated as the 3rd easiest country in the world to start a business. There is good access to startup capital in this country. We have a very nurturing environment of technology centers, universities, innovator hubs. In fact, 3 of the top 20 incubators in the world are in Canada, with number 1 in North America being Ryerson right here in the city, and the other 2 out west. And you look at the millennial generation that is using these hubs and innovating, leveraging social media, creating the sharing economy. They have a confidence that they can change the world, and they are changing the world. So as we look at Canada, who we are today and what strengths we have going forward, a huge strength for Canada is the diversity of our country. It's a significant asset for Canada because diversity in all its shapes and forms leads to innovation, and we've all seen that. But what the magic secret sauce for Canada is diversity and inclusion. We are an inclusive society in this country. It's a big part of brand Canada, and it's a big part of our success in attracting the best and brightest to our country to help lead. The next generation of millennials is the most diverse we've ever seen. And if you look at the graduating class, the undergrad class across this country in 2015, a third of them were born outside the country and were visible minorities. In our own institution at RBC, we've tried to lever this. This year, we brought in around 950 summer students, co-ops, interns into this city, into our head office, into our technology group. And we did something very different for the first time. We took 32 of those 900 students, we put them into special teams of 4, and we gave them some of our toughest challenges to solve as a business, challenges that we find difficult to solve internally. We didn't give them a lot of help, and we asked them to present back. We gave this challenge in May. We asked them to present back in mid-August, and the results were outstanding. We have now filed 2 patents from the work that these young students did over the past 3.5 months. And we looked back at the group of students. 2/3 of them were immigrants to this country, born outside Canada, which is outstanding. And they spoke collectively among them 20 different languages. They are teaching us within our own company how to work in an agile way, how to team in a very different way, how to break down the hierarchy and silos of organization and create, innovate at a much greater pace. And we believe we're sending them back to school with a very different perspective on how to learn, how to challenge their professors, how to challenge each other in school, and how to solve problems in a very different way. The other strategic asset that I think Canada has in this journey is work-integrated learning. I've talked about it a lot. I've written op-eds. It's very important, I think, to our future. In Canada, you probably don't know, over 50% of undergrads in this country have access to co-ops, work-integrated law apprenticeships, opportunities, which I think fundamentally changes how we learn, how we work. As I said, it's the basis of innovation in our economy. And what it also does, it's the great democratizer of opportunity. It's the great social lever. How do you get that first job in our economy, that first career opportunity? And co-op, internships, placements really level the playing field for people who don't have a network within our existing economy. And it helps spur entrepreneurships. I started as a co-op student, as you referenced, 30 years ago at the University of Waterloo. My first job was as a COBOL programmer at RBC. We still have COBOL programs, so I might have to dust them off one day. But for me, that was the entry. And as these students go back to their campuses after their internship with us, they may not come back and work as employees. They may. They may come back as partners. They may come back as entrepreneurs. They may come back as competitors. But one thing we do know, they will make Canada stronger at the end of the day. So there was so much that we have to build for the next 150 years, such a great platform to create made in Canada opportunities. But we have challenges at the same time. If you look at Silicon Valley, there are over 250,000 Canadians working and innovating in the Valley alone, creating companies, investing in the future that aren't here right now in our own country doing the same thing. While we have good access to startup capital, many of our companies, most of our companies and startups in Canada aren't successful stage 2 companies or stage 3 companies. We're selling far too early in the innovation cycle and the company life cycle. So how do we encourage young entrepreneurs to stay, to create here, to have the confidence to grow their companies to the next stage, to be the next BlackBerry of our country, or more recently, the next Shopify? Well, certainly I'm looking to challenge the panel with all of these ideas. So now it's time for me to introduce our panel and ask them to come up. I've got 3 young entrepreneurs, as I just said, very, very excited. The first is Lauren Friese, who's a leading expert on millennials and careers. She's founder of TalentEgg. It's a Toronto-based online career resource center, and it's Canada's most popular job board. And Lauren sold her company in 2015. So again, some great opportunities to pursue that. So welcome, Lauren. Mallorie Brodie is the CEO and co-founder of Bridgit, a communication platform for the construction industry in Waterloo. And Lauren is an advisory board member for the Creative Destruction Lab, and also, very prestigiously, won the Google Demo Day in San Francisco against the globally competitive talent group. So that's fantastic. Quite an accomplishment. And third, Wisam Abdulla, CEO and co-founder of Hazel, all the way from Vancouver. Wisam, thank you for traveling all the way. A people and cultural software company, previously CEO of Rise, and a commentator on the future of work and millennials, which I do want to get to. So welcome, and I'm going to sit down and we're going to get going. So thank you. So I'd really like to start right at the beginning. So maybe not your childhood, but where did the idea come from to start your first company? Very curious. Maybe Mallorie, we'll start with you. When you think of Bridgit, where did the idea come from and how did you get started?
So at Bridgit, we started in a bit of an untraditional way. We were part of an accelerator program in Toronto called the Next 36. And typically the story you hear of most startups is, childhood friends, they grew up on the same street together, they've known each other for 25 years before they get going. And my business partner and I literally incorporated the day we met throughout the program. So essentially the way the program worked is you had $90,000 of initial startup capital, mentorship, and they said, go out there and find an idea. And so for us, it was really about initially taking the industry experience that we had. So my business partner, Lauren, is a civil structural engineer. I was coming from a business background at Ivy, and then both of our families had been in the construction business. And so we took that experience, that family background, and said, okay, the construction industry is very, very big. How are we going to focus within this industry? And the most obvious thing to us was going out to the job sites. So as soon as the program started, we went back to our campus at Western University, and we drove around in my Sebring convertible at the time, my mom's hand-me-down car, and drove up to the job sites and essentially walked on and said, how can we help you? What are your pain points? What's frustrating? How can we help? And that was really what led us to this one specific process on the job site called punch list management, which is essentially issue tracking. And from there, to start to work with those customers, develop the product, and eventually launch the product in March 2014.
That's fantastic. It's been a huge success. Sam?
So my path is not as clear. It's a little bit more muddled. My dad is a serial entrepreneur, so I was always surrounded by that growing up. I think there's a picture of me when I'm 6 standing on a milk crate operating a cash register. So I always did little things throughout life. When I was 16, I was selling T-shirts. When I was 18, I was selling concert tickets. And then throughout university, I got into marketing, started doing consulting. Started my first startup, which was the one before this, Rise, which we started 5 years ago. It was me, my dad, and my brother. Payroll in Canada, sort of giving ADP a run for its money. More so the other way around. I think the biggest thing that I saw in that 5 years is that work is changing. And I think that a lot of what we're talking about today is really relevant to that. We talk about this new millennial generation that's taking up the majority of the workforce. We talk about consumerization of companies. Dave was telling me that RBC is now doing crazy voice-activated things. 10 years ago would have totally been unheard of. And I think that a lot of those things that we're seeing is driving what work is going to look like in the future. And the opportunity that we saw with that is because the workplace is changing, HR is going to change as well. It's not enough for them to just be the personnel department anymore, maintaining files. They now need to create an employee experience. And it's the employee experience that's key today for companies being able to attract those smart grads that Dave talks about and also, of course, retain them. So that's the opportunity that I saw at Rise. So about 3 months ago, me and my brother, who is my co-founder at Rise, my current co-founder at Hazel, and our VP of marketing at Rise, we decided to leave the mothership and focus solely on that vision. So 3 months ago, we started our company Hazel, and there's 9 young, bright people that are working on that today.
Fantastic. And Lauren, where did you start?
Yeah,
TalentEgg.
I started TalentEgg based on my own experience. It goes back to being at Queen's University and sitting around a table with all of my housemates. We were all very involved in school. We were at a good school, so we thought it is a good school, in good programs. And
we get some cheering from
and all
here.
very focused, very involved
Yeah.
in leadership capacities and whatnot. And I have this vivid memory of sitting there about to graduate and all of us looking at each other and saying, what are we going to do next year? And I thought that this was very strange because you grow up being told, go to school, get a good education, and at the end there will be some kind of career there for you. That's the way I felt. I decided to do what I think a lot of young people did then and continue to do today. I decided to delay my entry into the workforce by going to pursue a master's degree in the London School of Economics in London, England. And when I graduated there, I found that the school-to-work transition was much more well-developed there than it was here in Canada. Part of that experience for me as a young person with a lot of education and not a lot of work experience was that there were all these great online career resources that helped connect people like me with meaningful career opportunities. I used one of those online resources, worked in consulting for a year in London, and then moved back to Canada to try to implement something similar here. So launched TalentEgg in 2008. Ran very fast, very hard for 8 years, and then the company was acquired last year.
Fantastic. So it's never an easy journey. And you start and you have to build so many broad skills. And most entrepreneurs I talk to, there's always dark days, and some call it days of despair before there's light at the end of the tunnel. Can you talk about some of the biggest challenges you had to overcome as you got this idea and you started to push forward? Kind of where was that big challenge? Maybe Lauren, I think.
Yeah, I would say very broadly the challenge for me was that everything felt either really, really amazing, something fantastic happened, or something horrible happened. It was a roller coaster every day, but it was unsustainable. And so my first real memory of feeling like I don't know how I'm going to do this was it was just me. We were coming. I say we all the time, but it was just me, and I was coming close to closing one of the first sales at TalentEgg. It was with a large telecommunications company in Canada. And I felt that the answer was going to be yes. And of course, I picked up the phone to close the deal, and the answer was no. And I turned around and I started to cry. And I thought, this is just not a sustainable way to move through the business. And I think what I learned from that, and really the biggest skill and what allowed me to be so resilient and to persevere, which I would think you would both agree is a key skill, was the ability to sort of take that roller coaster that was like this and make it a little bit more like that, more like the ghoster coaster and less like the bat.
You have to persevere, and there's some dark days you have to fight through. Mallorie, what was your experience from the day you got the idea and started with your partner? What was one of the toughest challenges?
I think one of the toughest challenges was when we went out to initially go out and raise our first round of financing. And you hear all the startup hype around all these rounds of financing that are getting done, and you expect that it's going to be really easy, and it is absolutely not in any way. And the challenge for us, I think, was unique in that we were 2 female founders in the construction industry, in tech, going out to pitch this business with no existing network within the overall finance community in Toronto. And we were getting all this different feedback, and none of it seemed to match up, and we couldn't really figure out, what the problem actually was. And we went to a close group of advisors, and one of them said, he's like, I don't mean to offend you, but there's this thing called pattern recognition, and you two don't fit the pattern. And he's like, so we need to focus on something else in the business. You're not going to be able to go into that meeting and build up all this hype and momentum. We're going to need to approach it in a different way. And that was really hard for Lauren and I to hear, because usually you get feedback from advisors and you're like, okay, let's go switch it up. We couldn't exactly go switch that up. And so what we decided at that point in time was essentially, traction will solve all problems, so let's go out there, let's grow our revenue, and no one can argue with the numbers. And I think that was an extremely hard moment for us, but at the same time set the foundation at a very early point in time that nothing else mattered except for building the best product so we could then go out and sell it. And so that was really tough, but I think we're better for it now.
Yeah, you push through that early financing. Wisam.
I'm probably going to sound silly saying this in a room full of boomers, but 5 years felt like a lifetime. There are so many low lows that I could pinpoint, like the time that we had to lay off 20% of our 50-person team, the time that we had 3 months of cash left in the bank and had no idea how we were going to raise that next round, the time that we missed raising the next round and had to push things forward and reorganize. But I think at the end of the day, the thing that I've learned is that roller coaster is real. And we joked about resiliency earlier, and I have this dark joke that resiliency is built through being kicked in the pants so many times that you stop feeling it. And I kind of feel like that's the way it is. We're 3 months into the new company, and we've had so many high highs and so many low lows, and I feel like in some ways I've sort of become numb to the lows. It's like, yeah, I've been there, I've done that. It's like, nah, like that call. Like I've had so many of those calls now. It's like, oh, no? Okay, cool, have a great day, bye. I think it goes with the territory. I think it's absolutely what we signed up for, and I think that the quicker you learn that and become acclimated to that, the quicker you can succeed in spite of it.
Just to the group, who helped you the most? Did there someone that when you look back, helped you push through that mountain, and you look back and say, wow, that was a seminal moment in the toughest challenges? I'll open it up.
For us, I know it was our very first investor that we had, Dan DeBow, who's a well-known, tech founder and investor in Toronto. And I think back to some of the major milestones of our company. So the first round of financing, he wrote us the very first check, for instance, outside of the Next 36 program. I think of our board member, Sam Sebastian, who's the managing director of Google Canada that we brought on, and that was through an introduction that Dan made. So some of these major milestones for our company really came through the involvement that he had in our company. And it's so interesting because I think when a lot of people think of mentors or advisors, they think of someone that you're maybe going to spend hours and hours kind of sorting out these different problems with. And with Dan, it's usually a 3-letter text message, a really quick 30-second phone call, but you get right to the meat of the subject. And then he's really a great person to have on your team when you need to solve those hard problems or make those next major jumps. So he's definitely someone that stands out for us.
Yeah, great. Anyone else?
I think that mentorship in general has been something that's been important to me over the years. I continue to have a pretty strong mentor network, but the first person that came to mind was actually my dad. He came to Canada with nothing when he was 17 and has been through that roller coaster ride for the last 30 years, way longer than my 5. And he definitely has always been instrumental in my corner, and yeah, I appreciate that.
Or yourself?
I mean, I would say my family as well, but I think my...
You guys are making me look really...
No.
I
was going to say...
Mallorie's a stone cold entrepreneur.
You didn't help me find a board member, Mom? You're out.
Because TalentEgg didn't have any formal investors, we bootstrapped the business. For me, it was number 1, a key hire, but also number 2 was at the very beginning was my network actually from university, who were at the time a few years out of school, who were very, very generous with me, helping me understand different parts of the various businesses that they were involved with. Because as a recent graduate with very little experience, I actually had no idea, how the HR department of an organization worked, and that was where I was going to be selling my product. I had no idea what campus recruiting was. I had no idea how to do PR or marketing or any of those things, and I found that, especially as a young entrepreneur, and I think increasingly even now, since those past 8 years, people are extremely generous with their time for young entrepreneurs. I found that through Futurepreneur, which I was involved with, and also through basically anybody I ever met at any networking event.
So as you get your first round of financing, as you start to think about growing, you need to surround yourself with great people, but you got to be careful. So how do you think about hiring and talent, and what do you look for in growing your company? And maybe the second part of that question, would you hire a boomer? Wisam, why don't you start? If I applied.
I mean, I looked at your LinkedIn last night, and the only experience the only experience you have is at RBC. I don't know if that makes you unhireable or not. One job usually doesn't look good at a resume. No, I think that hiring is tough. I mean, I think that anyone in this room can agree with that. You know, it's like a short-term marriage almost, right? It's like you spend some time with them, you know, sometimes it's hopefully more than just one interview. You know, I always think that's weird. You do like 1, 2 interviews, and it's like, okay, like, come fill this very important role at my company for the next many years. You start tomorrow. I think companies are getting better at it. I know this is something we talked about earlier, that sort of, you know, 2-interview step process is a thing of the past. I think people are starting to dig in more, starting to, hey, why don't you come spend some time at the company, you know, work on this little project with me, we'll see how that goes, see if we work together. I think it's always been tough. And there's definitely been plenty of hiring mistakes that I've made personally, which have resulted in, you know, some of those lows, having to let friends go. It's tough.
Yeah.
I think that you give it your best effort, and you try to learn as much about that person and try to see if you can work together well, and you go for it.
Lauren at TalentEgg, how do you?
Well, I think it's telling that, you know, the 3 of us arrived about an hour in advance, and right away our conversation went to how difficult it was to hire great talent. Not necessarily the fact that great talent doesn't exist, because there is tons of great talent in Canada. I think you guys would agree, maybe not, but it's more about finding talent that fits and helping them succeed in your environment. That was right away. That's what we talked about basically the entire time. I had a lot of success in hiring, but also definitely a lot of failure. One thing that I tried to keep with me throughout it was that if I had to get to the point of letting somebody go, that was ultimately my fault. That was one of my first leadership lessons, because even if I wasn't the person responsible for making the hire, I was steering the ship. And those are heavy lessons for a 24-year-old, but something very important that I'll take with me.
Mallorie.
I think one thing we learned very early on, actually that's a lie, we learned it very recently.
Constantly learn it.
Yeah, so what we used to do when we were, you know, we had far less capital, we were much earlier, we didn't have, you know, a huge talent pipeline to pull from. We were kind of bringing on these people that made sense for the job that it was at that time. And we weren't looking at the company and where it was going to be 12 or 24 months down the road. And I think that's something that we absolutely do now. And we tell people, you know, look, like you're going to be doing some work that maybe is slightly below what you think you're capable of doing, and we acknowledge that, but 6 months from now, this role is going to look completely different. And that's just how it is at a fast growth company. So that was a major learning. We're not hiring people for today. They need to make sense 2 years from now. So that was a big one. And then the second big lesson I think that we learned was around not just hiring for these, you know, very technical skills that people have, but just really testing their overall resourcefulness and resilience. And the one interview question that we always go back to, which now I'm not going to be able to ask anymore, I don't think, after telling all of you, but what was the last thing that you negotiated the price on? And some people just jump into that, and they can think of all these different examples where they had to negotiate either the price or just, you know, something else in life. And then there's many people that don't have to do that. And as at a startup, that's one of the most important skill sets that we have. You're constantly negotiating. And so that's just an example of the type of thing that we go for, as opposed to, you know, what are your 3 biggest weaknesses or something like that. So it's still very much a work in progress, but we're just trying to get better and better with the process every day.
When I go down to the Valley and I talk to entrepreneurs there, American entrepreneurs, they characterize Canadians as, you know, amazing people who want to work for Google, whereas Americans want to create the next Google. Like, how do you respond to that? Are we being ambitious enough? Do we think globally enough as entrepreneurs? How do you react viscerally to that?
I don't think that we are ambitious enough, especially in entrepreneurship. I mean, if you look at Canada, per capita, we have way less tech companies, certainly, but also if you think like exits, large sizes of funding, all of that. Like we were talking about Sweden earlier, right?
Yeah.
Like a quarter of the size, but has way more to show per capita than we do. I think part of it is the Canadian mentality, and that sucks to say as a Canadian, but I mean, it's something that we all joke about in this room, you know, like friendly Canadians. I think that something that is important to me, and I think something we're going to talk about today, is pushing that mindset and trying to challenge where that bar is set. And I think that through conversations like that, that's how we ultimately can get to a place where we're raising that bar and pushing things forward.
That's interesting because I don't think it's just on the side of the entrepreneurs that aren't being as ambitious, it's also the investors. And so I know like the conversations we'll have with investors in San Francisco, for instance, they're far less caught up on a lot of the small details of the business, and they're much more focused on the overall big picture and what the overall market opportunity is. And I think here they're much more focused on, well, you know, exactly what is your sales process right now? Is that completely standardized? What's the playbook? What's the exact growth that you have month over month? And they focus on sort of these more short-term metrics. And I think it's up to really both sides. We need the entrepreneurs to be raising the bar, but we also need the finance community to raise the bar with the entrepreneurs and be supportive of that.
Yeah.
And I think that attitude is actually repeated or evident in large companies as well, and it's a threat to what I think we're all hoping is a culture of innovation, where there's a lot of emphasis on hard skills. What can you do for me today versus what can you do for me in the future? And I just think that's an interesting comparison.
We were talking about this before. I came home recently from a long business trip where I made a few speeches, and my teenage son challenged me on some of the concepts. And his message was, Dad, you know, you boomers, you're not exactly leaving me a great place to grow up in. And I think he was referring to, you know, some of the climate change and some of the challenges. When you think of how boomers and how millennials look at the world together, and what would you ask boomers to do to make your lives easier in leading this country? And how do you see the perspective between the two? How do you look at the world of business? How do you look at society? Big question. Is there a difference? Or are we just different stages of...
I think that every generation has approached work with a certain level of optimism and excitement for the future, and this thought, this belief that they can change the world. I think the difference for boomers who were brought up, or at least stereotypically, were hippies. You know, when you think about optimism in the future, Generation X, you think of like the just do it mentality, Nike. I think the thing about millennials is that, you know, we have that same feeling, that idea that we can do whatever we want. We've been brought up being told that we can follow our passion. I think that this perfect storm of increased access to education, improved technology, changing attitudes, and that's the part we need the boomers' help with, have actually made that kind of change possible, this idea that everybody can find work that is purposeful and feels meaningful. So I would say cooperation and actually shifting the workplace and the work environments to fulfill that hope that we all had and still have.
Anybody else want to jump in, or should I move?
I mean, I feel like generations have bad institutional knowledge in that I've never sat down and thought about, you know, boomers leaving us with a bad world. It actually wasn't until you mentioned today, I was like, oh, it's a good point.
I should just keep quiet, is that?
You know, despite some of the negative characterizations of millennials, I actually like to think of us as the lemonade generation, you know, like we were left with what we have and we get out there and we make it happen. And it doesn't look all the time like it did maybe in your generation. But I mean, sitting up here, it still looks pretty good.
Absolutely, yeah, great point. Let's talk about our educational system. Did it prepare you for the path you've chosen? How can we do a better job in preparing people to follow in your footsteps to lead in a different way? Can you, any insight into where we are and what we can do differently, and how you think about, you know, post-secondary education and even secondary education?
So I don't think, so I studied an entrepreneurship certificate while I was getting the business degree and definitely learned a lot of things from that, but I wouldn't say it prepared me for this journey that we've been on at Bridgit, but at the same time, not everyone's going to go that entrepreneurial route. So I don't know how much we should change the overall education system to be completely suited to the crazy people that are right here on both sides of me, because not everyone needs to be an entrepreneur. The one skill set that I would say could be more prevalent throughout our education system is the sales skills. And that's something that absolutely did not come up in my education, and I think is completely applicable to any career path that you're going down, whether it's going and pitching yourself to a new company that you're looking to get hired at, or actually doing sales. And that's one thing that I think overall within organizations and within universities we should definitely put a bigger effort into pushing.
I'm going to actually push back against that. I read a short excerpt of a book recently. I don't know what it's called, but it talks about financialization. And basically one of the big things that they credit the slow economic growth that we're seeing across the world, like record low in the last 50 years, is that not as many people are starting businesses. And they say that 30 years ago, the rate of new businesses was significantly higher than it is today. And they say that a lot of that is what was actually driving that growth that we saw in those heydays 30 years ago. So I think we actually need more people starting businesses. I think we need less people going to work at Google and more people starting the Googles. And it doesn't have to be Google. It doesn't have to be tech. It could be, a clothing boutique or a shoe store or whatever. Like, it doesn't have to be a fancy tech company. It can just be a small business that helps pump the economy. And I think that those skills should be taught more in school, and I think that opportunity should be given to more people. And I think that should be a stronger alternative when people are graduating. I don't think the decision should be what big company should I go work at. I think that a viable path should be what new business am I going to go start that either provides, help to a small group of people or changes the world.
I mean, I've said this before, but I think that universities in Canada at least are going through an identity crisis, and it is in part because of conversations like this where we talk about university and college as if it should be preparation for a job or a career, when really that wasn't the original intention of universities in the first place. I have an undergrad in economics, a master's in history, economic history, and did that prepare me for the actual day-to-day of my career as an entrepreneur and in digital media? Absolutely not. But from a soft skill perspective, in preparing me to be an adult, to be resilient, to persevere, to have good communication skills, to problem solve, to communicate, absolutely it did. And so.
Great. I'm going to go to the audience in 1 minute. Quick comments on diversity and how you think about diversity in the context of innovation and running your companies, and what do you look for, and how should we think about it? I'll open it up.
So my co-founder and I, we were both coming from very different educational backgrounds. I was in business, she was in civil engineering, and so right off the bat, I think that we were very open to the fact that I didn't have all the skills that were required, and neither did she. And the one thing that we said very early on was, if it were just her, we wouldn't fail enough, and if it were just me, we would fail too often. And so we balance each other out in that way. And so I think because we started from different backgrounds, we've been very quick to realize, what are we not good at, and so what skills or experience do we need to bring into the company to ensure that we're successful. And we really encourage our entire team to think in that way too. So it's not about being able to do everything. It's being able to put your hand up and admitting, and being able to admit when you can't do something, so then we can bring in the right people. So we have quite a lot of diversity in terms of age, gender, and overall university representation at our company, which I think we're really fortunate to have, and it's from that initial foundation, I think.
Lauren, any thoughts?
When I started the company, first of all, my strategy was to hire for the thing that I was worst at, and then continue to hire for all of the different things I was worst at, and always hire people that were much smarter than me and much better at those things. So I started with sales and moved on from there. I think the interesting thing is that as a company that focused on the new graduate and campus space, I was very adamant, and as someone with an arts background, I was very adamant about hiring people from a diversity of backgrounds and training them in-house and helping them to succeed in our environment. What happened, and again, something that came up in our conversation beforehand, was that actually in a tiny company, when you're moving, a relatively tiny company compared to yours, and when you're moving at a...
We wish we could move as fast as you.
Yeah, but at a very quick pace, it's actually very difficult to train people quickly enough for it to make sense for the company. And so I think that there is a responsibility on the part of larger corporate Canada to offer training programs and focus more so than small companies, more so than ever, on hiring people with diversity of thought, diversity of background for their own benefit, but also for the benefit of young entrepreneurs that need to hire good people with some experience.
Yeah, great point. Sam, any other thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's something that I've gone back and forth on. I think there is an argument to be made that early on, when you're a small team, less than 30 people, you can actually move quicker if you're all on a very similar wavelength. I think that, and I know that that's not a popular opinion maybe, but I think that later as you grow in scale, you definitely do need that diversity of opinion. I mean, you in your opening remarks talked about bringing on those co-op students to tackle some of the hardest problems. I really like that. Like, I think that's really interesting, because if you're immersed in this stuff all day and sort of in an echo chamber, it's hard to think outside of the box.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, I mean, absolutely value in diversity. I'm going to take the counterpoint and say that when you're small, there is an argument maybe that you can move faster if you're tighter knit. If you have like a 10-person company with like your buds.
Is there a tendency to kind of hire people that think like you and are friends and like the same things? And how do you break out of that? And
I think that's probably the trick, right? Like maybe you move faster earlier, but I think you need to break out of that at some point.
Which, as you said before, you have to let some of your friends go because you're going in a different direction. Why don't we open it up to the audience? Any questions from a very large group here? Hard to see from here. We see a hand up in the middle. We have a microphone coming across.
Hi there. My name is Arjun. First of all, thanks so much. It's great. You guys have been so open, and it's been a great conversation. I guess my question is, sort of while you've been on this journey of building your companies, what were some of the things that you were willing to sacrifice and some of the things that you weren't willing to sacrifice, throughout the process? And if you could just comment, even just more generally on the things you've sacrificed.
I can just very quickly start. Just very quickly, at the very beginning, I sacrificed stability and a salary. I was a consultant in London, flying all over Europe, having great time, great life, on a good trajectory, and went to starting a business. So I was willing to give that up, and that is a lot easier to do when you're young than when you're older, because the opportunity cost just changes completely. But the thing I wasn't willing to give up was some free time. So I wasn't one of those, and I speak in the past tense because I'm speaking of that specific experience. I didn't give up on some of the things that I like to do outside of work. I never worked crazy hours. I worked hard and smart, but I still made time to do stupid things like watch TV and see my friends, which isn't stupid, but there, a lot of people wear it like a badge of honor. Like, I gave up everything. I never saw my friends. I wasn't able to cultivate good relationships with partners or family or whatever it is. I wasn't willing to give that up.
Good for you.
So I did give up all of that early on, and then learned that that's not how to do it. If you're going to be in something 5, 10, 15, 30 years, I think that something you learn is that it really doesn't get easier. Like, it's the same sort of level of challenge for a consistent and prolonged period of time, just different challenges. And if you're constantly delaying gratification, like, oh, I'll do this when things are here, or I'll do that when things are here, you're always going to be in that position. And I think that's something I learned the hard way early on. Like, the first 3 years were quite miserable, to be honest. And I think now, second time around, something that I am not willing to sacrifice is my own enjoyment in life. One of our core values is joy. And for us, that means everyone at the company, regardless of what level you're at, being able to enjoy your life and to get happiness in your work and to allow your work to provide happiness in your life, whether that means flexibility, different working hours, more vacation time, whatever it is. I think that if we have happier people who are enjoying their life and happier founders, we're going to be a better company.
Fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. We definitely, similar to both of you, like in the early days, gave up all of the luxuries that you're used to, or I was lucky to be used to anyways, in terms of making money and all those different things. And we kind of had a rotating group of people living in our boardroom/bedroom. We were working out of my old basement apartment, and first my sister and I slept in there, and then every day we'd put away the mattress, put down the tables, same thing every day. And then our customer experience manager lived there for a while. So same kind of like typical startup story that you would hear. From a business perspective, though, the one thing that we did not give up was good partners in the business, and that's something that when we were first starting and you have no capital, no one's paying themselves, and all you want is investment or revenue or something so you can kind of start to legitimize the business a little bit. And at first you think you're going to take money from anyone. And people say, like, no, like, people are going to be with you for a long time. Make sure to work with people that you like. And we were really fortunate, I think, before we were even really considering that, to get very lucky with our initial investors. But now that we've had, larger investment in the company, we are so thankful that we really enjoy working with the people that have partnered with us. And that's something that I think for any entrepreneur that's starting out and you just want to raise that big round of financing, do not sacrifice kind of the quality of people that you're working with, because it would be much, much, much more difficult if I couldn't, quickly call one of our investors and have a candid conversation with them. So that's one thing that more as a business, as opposed to personally, that you should never, I think, give up.
Yeah, great advice. I saw another hand over here. Do we have another question?
So I have the mic over on the far side in your blind spot.
There we go, right over here.
So in Dave's opening comments, he talked about how a lot of young entrepreneurs will sell their companies at an early stage and perhaps sell those to the south of Canada. I noticed that 2 of you have already sold your companies. Can you comment on why you sold your company so early? And second, did you fit that example of what selling to the U.S.?
Well,
Ladies first.
I would never want to, my experience is probably not representative of anybody else's experience, but for me it was a combination of, the right offer, the right situation, the right timing, and the right opportunity for me personally. But again, I don't think, so quickly. I was doing it for 8 years, which again, this sounds ridiculous in the context of a 30-year career, but actually is a very long time in the world of entrepreneurship. We had accomplished quite a bit, and I felt that it was a great opportunity to let somebody else take the reins and take the company to the next level, that I didn't feel that I was the right person to do that. So that was a personal decision on my part, and I don't think representative of the greater trend that you're talking about.
So we spun out this new company. It wasn't as much of an acquisition, but I'd say that the long-term goal for this company, as much as we say that we want to be like a Shopify going public, the more likely path is probably to be acquired by one of those big U.S. companies who we're already starting to rub elbows with. Like, hey, you like us now? You're going to like us in 5 years. And I'd say that for a venture-backed tech company, that's just the path that you have to take, right? The expectation of taking in that large sum of investor money is that you're going to return some large multiple of it back, and the only way to do that is either to get acquired or to IPO. So when you take that money, you're sort of committing yourself to one of those 2 paths, right?
There is a lot of talk at the federal level and at the provincial level in trying to solve for this problem. There is a strong perception among business leaders and the government that we have to solve for this. We have to create cash flow. The government has to buy from small companies. Big companies like RBC have to buy from small companies to help sustain into stage 2 and stage 3. So I think there's a lot of talk in our various levels of leadership in this country about needing to encourage our entrepreneurs, but it's not just encouragement; it's the cash flow you need, right, to keep going. Do we have any other questions out there? Right here in the middle.
There.
Yep.
I have a mic. Hi, my name's Noah. Thank you so much for sharing your insights this afternoon. So, if you could travel back in time to your earlier self, you're sort of just on the cusp of starting your first business. What piece of advice would you give yourself, knowing what you know now?
Be patient. So the word patience in entrepreneurship, I think like any entrepreneur hates that word, because in order to be an entrepreneur, you probably are not patient at all. But that was one thing that we learned in the very early days. I think you set very aggressive milestones for yourself as an early stage company, and you constantly want to be moving forward. But then over time, you start to realize that there's some situations and some milestones that you need to be as aggressive as possible on, but there's other situations that take much longer term view to actually be successful in. So I can think back to specific customers that we were desperately trying to get on board in the early days, and we approached it in the completely wrong way. And it was a Canadian CEO that said, Mallorie, be patient. Be patient. This will take years to happen. So sit back, relax, and we'll kind of work it out. And so I think ever since I learned that we try and separate every part of our business into different phases. So what are those things that can happen in the next 6 months? What are the things that are going to take 3 years to happen? And how do we approach those different relationships? How do we approach those relationships in a different way?
I would say cultivating your network. I think that's something that I didn't take important enough early on was that. I think now, second time around, more important than the actual know-how in building a business that I learned over the 5 years is that network that I built. There's like a saying that you're only as valuable as your network or something like that, and I think that there's a lot of truth to that. So I would say cultivating a network, especially if you're a new company and trying to get first customers and first money in and first employees. Like that has come from my network. And I think that that's the most important thing for young entrepreneurs is knowing that you need to be able to leverage that and work on that.
I would say, I talked a lot about how I watch TV, which is a strange thing to share with you all. But one thing that I didn't do was take time to really separate myself from work. So if I was home, and I think that everybody suffers from this suffers or benefits from it, however you want to look at it, because of the integration of work and life, in large part due to great Canadian success story, BlackBerry. So I rarely took real vacations. I rarely had real off time. And I found that after I sold the business and through the transition period after that, I was a lot more tired than I thought I would be. And it took quite a while to wake up again. So I would tell myself, you said something earlier, don't wait. Don't wait to start paying yourself so that you can be comfortable. Don't wait to take vacations. Don't wait for some outcome that you think might come in the future. Enjoy the experience and make sure you're getting enough rest and really turn off so that you don't burn out.
Great advice. We're running out of time. I'm going to leave you with one tough last question. We're heading into the next 150 years.
Are you looking at me?
Don't ask it.
Any ideas for Canada? Any big idea for Canada? Lauren?
I think that if we want to be a truly innovative company, and as someone who worked with the talent acquisitions departments of all of Canada's large corporations, I think that a major change that needs to happen is hiring for potential instead of hiring for credentials or some sort of proof from the past. We would. Yeah, I'll leave it at that.
No, that's great. Keep going.
We would be in. I have countless memories of meetings with large companies, consulting firms, CPG companies, banking, that claimed that they'd like to hire people with a diversity of thought, diversity of credential, diversity of background. But when it came down to it, really we're hiring the same group of people from the exact same pool with some sort of proof that they could come in and do the job tomorrow. And I think that's great. You will get the job done that way. But I don't think that you will be hiring the right people or putting together the right team to innovate for the future.
That's a great message back on diversity and paradigms and thinking openly about the future and how we can learn from your experiences and your journey going forward. So I want to sincerely thank you on behalf of the entire group. You're great Canadians. I think we all feel confident in our future when we see young leaders who are so mature and so thoughtful and so balanced are going to lead us to a great place. So thank you very much. Thanks everyone for coming today.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Fred Mifflin, and I am the current president of the Canadian Club. Dave, I want to thank you for so brilliantly outlining Canada's exciting innovation future, and to RBC for strongly supporting and driving the innovation agenda. We have many opportunities to seize and a lot of avenues to explore. Your discussion with our panelists provided proof positive that Canada truly is a nation of innovators. As you noted, for innovation to flourish, the environment needs to be primed. Investments in infrastructure, education, technology, and training are critical, and so is supporting the ideas of our next generation. Lauren, Mallorie, and Wisam, we salute you for your bold aspirations, risk-taking, unwavering determination, and especially your ability to laugh. Your hard work, perseverance, and great ideas are being put to good use. Please continue to lead us towards the next 150 years as Canada moves boldly forward. Let me take this opportunity to both thank you and to wish you all continued success in the future. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. I would like to just take a quick opportunity to echo the sentiments that Fred has outlined, and also to thank you again for joining us, to thank our sponsors, Gluskin Sheff, EY, the City of Toronto, and also Norton Rose Fulbright. Thank you very much again for your support. And again, on behalf of the Canadian Club, the next time you open a newspaper, you hear the doom and gloom of all this stagnant global economy and all the craziness in other parts of the world, and you want to think about a great reason to be proud and to look forward to the future of our Canada as we approach our 150th birthday, think about what you heard about today and what the youth will have to bring to bear on that future. All the best to you. This meeting is now adjourned. Thank you very much.